Got a 2016 Highlander. This is the 3.5 liter V6 model, and we're going to be changing out the water pump today. So I guess first thing we got to do is drain some coolant, and we're going to lift it up, take the shield off underneath so we can gain access to the radiator hose. There should also be a valve, little spigot that we can open up to drain the coolant as well. So that's probably the best way to do it. Let's get this thing up and take a look. Okay, so now I got this thing up. We're gonna pull this wheel off because we need to, we're gonna be working in behind here. The water pump is on this side of the car, engine's facing this way. So 21 mil, get these wheel nuts off. All right, another thing you're gonna wanna take off is this cover right here. So our water pump is in about this area right here. The belt's in the way and a bunch of other stuff. Obviously the belt runs the pulley that runs the water pump. So we wanna have good access to that area. So we'll take this off. It's two 10mm bolts, and there's also a plastic push pin that's in behind here. So there you go, you can see it in there. And we'll take that out. Once we get this shield off, it's gonna give us some more room to get in there. Now, these bolts like to get really rusty, so hopefully it doesn't snap off on you. But make sure you put some oil on them when you go to put them back in. You'll thank yourself in the future. That push pin, it was missing on this one, but the center of it will push in, and then you'll be able to take that off. That's the original clip design anyways, is the center just pushes in a little bit. Maybe it's been replaced and it's a different style. Some of them you have to get in there with a tool and pop it out, but either which way, we got that off. Gonna lift this thing up now. Some people like to take the fender liner out, but you can see the frame, or the body, sorry, drops down right here. So you're really not gonna get that much extra room. But if you take a look up in here, you can see there's the pulley for the water pump, and this piece that extends all the way over here, this is also part of the water pump as well. It's sitting on the bench over there to give you a overall picture of the size of it and how many bolts you're going to need to take out. So we're going to take this shield off now. There is a lower rad support that runs across here, and our radiator's up in here. This is just going to give us a better view of everything and also give us some access to the radiator drain. So we got a bunch of these 10 mils to come off, and just like those other ones I've shown you, they get really rusty, and if they don't ever get lubed, they will snap off. So we'll get all these out, and I'll probably end up extracting them. We'll put new hardware in it. All right, here's the petcock. We just unscrew this here. And try to catch the coolant. You don't want this stuff going down the drain. Recycle it appropriately. And we're going to be putting fresh coolant in it. This thing's been leaking for a while, so the owner's been topping up the coolant, which is a good thing. Make sure yours is leaking. Keep an eye on that coolant level, because if it runs low and you overheat the engine, it's not going to be good. You'll probably be doing head gaskets. We're not making a video on head gaskets, so. Okay, so the coolant's pretty much finishing up draining. We didn't really get a lot out of there. The engine block, the thermostat in behind that, the engine block, there's going to be a bunch of coolant. So when we take the water pump off, it's going to puke out more coolant. But what we need to do next is remove this engine mount. So this dog bone, and then also this part of the mount that is attached to the head. And that we do that so that we can gain access to, there's like a 90-degree piece where the coolant goes. This is like the coolant outlet that the water pump pushes the coolant through into this hose. So, or it may pull it in, I don't know which direction the coolant goes, but either which way, this has coolant in it. So we need to take this neck off and that 90-degree piece that goes into the water pump. So yeah, I'm just gonna grab socket. These are all 14 millimeters. And then there's also a couple nuts here for this bracket that's gotta come off. Those are 12 millimeters. So I wouldn't worry too much about supporting the engine. There's a mount down below that the engine actually sits on the subframe. So you can just go ahead and buzz these out. I'm gonna take this bracket off first. I'll probably pull one of these bolts out. I might do this one probably. And yeah, I'll grab a gun. All right, let's take this one out first. You can see the engine hasn't like dropped or moved forward or anything like that, so we're all good there. I might just try to leave this one in and take this whole thing out as an assembly. One thing you should do though is just organize your bolts so that you don't have a bunch of pile of like random sized bolts, because this one's gonna be really long, and then yeah, this one's probably the shortest one. These two will be the same length, and this one's for the dog bone. So you can either get yourself like a little organizer thing from the dollar store, that's what I like to do, and then use post-it notes, or you can also use a cardboard box, stab a bunch of holes in it, and use a Sharpie marker to write down which bolt goes where, draw a little diagram. We'll be doing that later with the water pump, just so we don't lose track of what bolts go where. So you can see we just do something like that. It's gonna work out real good. Some things as well, you can just end up putting the hardware back in the hole. And sometimes if you don't have an organizer or whatever, you want to try to keep track of things, like you can take the mount off, but then just leave the bolts in the holes. That works too. So we get that piece out of the road. So I'm gonna try to, we'll take this piece off. Little bracket. All right, it's been a while since I've done one of these, like a few years at least. So I can't remember if this piece is just a bracket that kind of cups over these two coolant lines, or if those are integrated into this. I can't remember. So we're just gonna take some bolts out here. Looks like we got like 3 of them. And then we'll see if this thing comes off. Now this bottom one, your air conditioning line's kind of in the way, so you may need sort of a, like I got these really shallow sockets. You might be able to just slip on there with a wrench too. If you got like the wrench where the box end sticks out a little bit, I'll grab one and show you. Might be able to get it off that way too. Okay, so you can see that wrench, how it protrudes out like that. That lets me sneak onto that bolt. And I might have to, I can't remember or not, there's a couple bolts, or one bolt for sure, that run into the body. And I have a feeling it's this bolt as well, like it's a pretty long bolt that'll run into these air conditioning lines or into the body. And it pretty much makes you have to jack the engine up in order to get those out.
Yeah, that one big long bolt. We've got a hole already drilled for that. You remember that, eh?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's one of them that I was talking about. Yeah. But is that the one that you got? Okay, we got one more bonus bolt down here somewhere. I can't see. Sorry. And I'm gonna need a probably a medium length socket. We'll try with the really shallow one first. Oh, maybe I can get it from here. I have to stand with you guys, I think. Maybe. I have to get a mirror and check. Okay, so there is actually two more bolts. I lied. There's more bolts than I thought. One here, and then another one right beside it. So there and there. All 14 mil. Take those out. And that should be it. We're loose now, so. Yep.
They're gonna sink in right beside that's what I mean. I don't remember that brake line being right there.
Yeah, maybe it got bent up out of the way.
Push her over. Oh, it's almost out.
All right, so this particular vehicle has a cheat, and it's already got a hole drilled through the spot where this bolt needs to come out. Because you're gonna find this one bolt, a really long one, whichever one it is, this one, is sitting, once I get that thing out of there, it's down in there, but it'll run into the body underneath of those brake lines, and it goes underneath the air conditioning line. And the only way to get this out is to undo the motor mounts, this one that we've taken off, and then the one that's down there as well. You might have to loosen off the front one that's down here, and then stick like a 2x4 on the oil pan with a floor jack and lift it up. And you have to get the engine up just enough that you can then sneak this bolt out over top of the lines. And it's a real pain, but that's how the manual wants you to do it. The hole though, I don't recommend drilling that hole. We didn't drill it, it's just there. So, but the reason why we don't recommend drilling is because all these brake lines run right here. So if you decide that you are going to drill it, just be extremely careful that you don't drill into your brake lines. Maybe try to move the brake lines out of the way a little bit if you can.
Don't even drill the hole.
Don't even drill the hole.
Don't drill holes.
I know one of you guys are gonna drill the hole, so. It saves you like an hour. Don't drill the hole. Okay, now we gotta get this piece out. It's sandwiched in there. You can see it's just like, it like cups around this piece here. So we need to get that out. These air conditioning lines are kind of in the road, but I think if we kind of bend them out of the way a little bit, we should maybe be able to sneak that out of there.
It'll be easier with the engine jacked up, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, the engine's got to be jacked up, so that's obviously why. But sorry, it's just these plastic mounts that clip those lines together.
It was just a weird position that you had to put it in. It jiggled right out.
Like this piece right here screws you because it runs into the line. If that brace piece wasn't right there, out of the cast, it'd probably just come right out. I don't mean shave it off. Don't shave it off. Now we're gonna take this coolant hose off. This goes to the bottom of your radiator. And our goal is to remove this whole neck and these two elbows all together as an assembly. So we're gonna undo this clamp, take this hose off, undo this clamp up here. And there's a hard line that has an O-ring on it that goes into the bottom outlet. So that one we're just going to have to work it off because there's no clamp or anything. So looks like we've got a couple 10mm bolts, and that's pretty much it. That piece bolts to the water pump. You'll see on your water pump there'll be a circular opening, and there's an O-ring that goes in there. So let's get this clamp off. And we can try to get this thing off. Now it may puke a bunch of coolant out. Okay. We don't have to completely remove the hose or anything. We just need it to be undone. So now we're going to try for this other one. And we just want to move the clamp just out of the way, still be able to access it with our pliers when we want to put it back on. And now I think we're going to remove this 10mm bolt. There's probably a couple more. There's at least one that's opposite on the other side down below. You're pretty much not going to be able to see what you're doing. It's kind of a blind spot. And the size of socket I'm using is like, it's a snap-on shallow, but it's kind of like a semi-shallow. And there's just enough room to sneak the ratchet in there to break it loose. You may be able to see it a lot better from underneath. I'm sure you can see it fine. You may even be able to get to it with a ratchet wrench or a regular wrench. So go from below. Okay, we have those two bolts out. I think the last thing is there's a nut. There's a stud that sticks out. So we're gonna take this nut off. Hopefully we can get this thing off. If it does slide over this stud, hopefully we can get this whole thing out far enough to get it up. If not, it's got an inverted Torx on the end of it, so I might just have to take the stud right out. Okay, so yeah, this I did not have to take that stud out. I just worked this thing back and forth, slid this hose off, and then we can get this piece out of here. So that's what it looks like. You got one bolt here, and the stud comes through here with a nut. They're all 10mm. And then, where did I put that bucket for? Yeah, now we're pretty much ready to get to the water pump. It is pretty buried in there, but not impossible to change. The thermostat, this is also the housing for the thermostat. That's where the thermostat lives. So, I mean, at this point in time, if you really want to change the thermostat, now's the time to do it. If your engine is overheated at all, change the thermostat. All right, up to this point, you may just have a leak coming from this crossover tube. It runs over to the other side underneath your intake, and that O-ring sometimes goes bad. Very rare case, but sometimes it happens. And at this point in time, you would take that O-ring off, replace it, clean up the pipe, make sure it's all good, and then reassemble in the reverse order. All right, so I can't remember if we need to take this pulley off prior to removing the pump or not. The impeller portion of the water pump is inside of the housing, but there's a little bit of the shaft that sticks out. So that's gonna catch on anything that we try to come up beside. For some reason, I think I have to remove this. So now's the time to do it because the belt holds the pulley in place and keeps the pulley from spinning. Otherwise it would just freewheel and you would have to hold the pulley somehow. So we're just gonna go ahead and loosen these off. Maybe not completely take them out just yet, but at least have them loose so that if I do need to take it off, I can just remove them by hand. Main difference compared to everything else. And then, yeah, you just stick a wrench on there and it should come off.
Sweet.
Yep. Okay, so I just wrote down a little diagram of how the belt goes on so that we have some reference material for when we go to stick it back on. We got our belt off. Now we're ready to remove all of the bolts. Yes, so I was correct about, see there's a bolt that's hidden behind this pulley. So we do need to remove the pulley in order to access the mounting bolts for the actual water pump housing. So it's good that we did loosen those off. That's good. Okay, so removed all the bolts for the pulley. Now the pulley won't come off because it runs into the body, but we need to move the pulley out of the road just like this so that we can access the bolts that hold the housing on. Now what I'm gonna do is just grab like a cardboard box and I'm gonna draw an outline of the new water pump and punch a bunch of holes where all the bolt holes are so that when we take bolts out of here, we can stick them in the box so we know exactly where they go because they will be different lengths and possibly different sizes. Looks like there's some 12 mils and it looks like there's some 10 mils. So very important that we do not mismatch those. Okay, now we need to remove this idler pulley, 14 millimeter bolt, and it is just regular thread. I think maybe it's left-hand thread. Nope. Maybe. I need a bigger ratchet. That's my problem. Yeah, just regular threads, nothing special about it. Just watch, there's like a little washer that goes on the back. Make sure you don't drop that. So we need to get that out of the road so that we can access these other bolts that are just hidden down behind them. So you can start removing the bolts one by one. You can see the little thing that I've got drawn out here on a box so that we can carefully place all of our bolts in the correct order. So when we go to reinstall, all of our bolts go back exactly where they're supposed to go. And I'm gonna start by removing this 10 mil up here. That stud can stay in there. It does not pass through the other side. Now, to get these couple extra bolts down at the very end here, I have removed the the tensioner pulley. And that's the one with the longer bolt. That's this one here. And it is a reverse thread. So in order to loosen that bolt off, with the wrench on it, you're gonna pull towards yourself. We're just taking bolts out. We're getting there. We're gonna have to probably go from underneath to get all the bottom ones out. But we are working away on it. So yeah, there you can see we got all our bolts laid out. That's a 12 mil bolt. These two will not be in the housing because they are part of the thermostat housing. They're 2 long 10 mils. So that's why those ones aren't there. Quite a lot of bolts that hold this thing on, but I get it. You gotta distribute the load across the piece. And there's a big gasket that goes in behind, so it's not like it's siliconed on there. Okay, so there's little plastic covers, one here, and then on the front motor mount, there's another one in the frame. So each motor mount has 3 17mm nuts. We're gonna loosen those all, we're gonna take those right off. And then the engine will still be sitting on the frame, so don't worry, nothing's gonna fall. Then we're gonna jack this up to get the water pump out. You can see it sitting in there. And if I remember correctly, it's gotta come out the top. Like I say, it's been years since I've done one of these. And we don't read the repair manual, we're just doing it, so. Hot nuts.
Oh, I love your hot nuts in my hand.
But have you ever had 3 hot nuts in your hand?
I heard it's rare, but I'm up for it.
Yep. Oh, those are small. They're 14s. All right, these front ones, I'm sorry I lied to you. Those 3 are 17 mil. These ones are 14. And just watch if you try to take these off. They do get really hot if the threads are all rusty. But if they come off nice and easy like that, probably not gonna burn you. Okay, so we got those loosened off, block of wood underneath of the oil pan, jacked it up. You can see there, we don't want to hurt the pan. So we stick a block of wood under there. Jack this thing up just enough to be able to sneak the water pump out, and it comes right out, so no issue. Honestly, if you're doing this, like I say, if this vehicle didn't have the hole in the firewall, I would just do it this way. I'm not going to drill a hole, or not the firewall, the wheel well. It's really not that hard. It's 3 bolts, or sorry, 3 nuts and 3 more nuts. 6 nuts, take them off, jack it up.
You end up having to do that anyway to get it out.
Yeah. So it's really, it's not that bad. It's nothing crazy. Okay, so we got that off. Now I'm gonna go in and clean up that mating surface that the gasket sits on. You can see on the side of the block. We'll get any dirt, corrosion, any of that stuff off of there, get everything cleaned up, ready to go. And then we just gotta slip our new gasket and water pump and all that stuff in there. So I'm gonna get to cleaning.
What kind of disc is that?
This is a 3M Roll-Lock disc meant for cleaning aluminum. They call it the Roll-Lock bristle disc. It's Scotch Brite, but it's like kind of rubbery plastic and it's soft. So it'll clean corrosion and stuff off of the aluminum without actually removing or damaging the aluminum. Unfortunately, I can't really get into a certain area with this because of the size of the head of this grinder, so kind of sucks. I'll probably just use some pretty fine emery cloth. I'm gonna wipe it off first with a rag and see how bad it is, but if there's some corrosion on the sealing surface in areas, that'll probably be my next go-to is some very fine emery cloth, and we'll wipe it down. Okay, so I'm just cleaning up these sealing surfaces here. And I'm also going to do the inside of here as well. There's 2 O-rings that come with our water pump. We're going to replace them both. Your hose goes onto this one. It sits in the vehicle like this. and we'll clean up this neck as well. It's already pretty clean, but if you have any corrosion and stuff on there, definitely clean that off. You could use some emery cloth or something that's not super abrasive. We want to be easy on the aluminum. And then we've got Ryan over at the bench grinder. What he's doing right now is he's got the diagram of all the bolts that hold the water pump on. Now some of those bolts actually have sealant, and we have to clean them off and apply new sealant for when we go to install. And very important that we do that to avoid any possible leaks. So he's just marking down on the box which ones have sealant, and then he's going to go ahead and clean all of the hardware so everything's nice and clean, fresh, ready to go. We can apply some sealant onto the threads and install. So very important that we make sure all of our threaded holes are cleaned out. We don't have any coolant trapped in them. One thing that might happen is when you go to tighten down the bolts, that coolant that's trapped in there can't go anywhere. And you run the possibility of fracturing the aluminum, sorry. So very important that we clean those out, all the holes. Same with all of our pulleys. Make sure that they're clean and that there isn't a bunch of dirt or coolant stuck in there, because that's just going to contaminate the belt. It's going to get pushed into the belt. So nice and clean. Everything's looking good. We got our surface all prepped up and we got all our bolts ready to go. So now it's time to put this thing back together. Our gasket is a multi-layered steel gasket. So you can see the old one.
It's over here.
Yeah, it's over here. Yeah, we got our gaskets here. They just have multiple layers of steel that they just stack on top of each other and rivet together. So there's no actual silicone or anything. You can see the stamped portion here that's sort of dented outwards. That crushes in when you torque down the water pump. So it's important that we follow the torque procedure, tighten this thing down uniform, however Toyota wants us to do that, in order to achieve a proper seal. And also, once again, that's why it's super important to make sure that our mating surface is nice and clean. So if you get a bunch of corrosion that's in one spot, it's not going to apply even pressure along the gasket. You could run into leaks, stuff like that. So pretty important. There is, like I say, sealant. I'm going to go get torque specs, the tighten down procedure, and which bolts need to have sealant on them. And we'll give you a rundown on that real quick, and then we're just going to go ahead and put this in. So we can see these are all the bolts for the water pump. The ones that are labeled A, those all have sealant on them, and they get torqued to 15 foot-pounds. And then we've also got B and C. Now it says for the two bolts labeled C to remove and replace them, or if you're going to reuse them, clean them off and apply sealant. And all of the ones labeled B and C get torqued to 8 foot-pounds. It says to use 1344 adhesive, which is like the standard for the adhesive. We're going to be using some of this Loctite. It's a ready gasket maker, and it works really good. It sets up really quick. It's very similar to the minute gasket maker that sets in like a minute or so. So that's pretty much it. We don't put any sealant on here or anything like that, just the bolts. So we're gonna drop this thing down in and get these bolts set up with some adhesive and put them in. There was no actual like torque procedure for like which ones to tighten first, so I'm just gonna probably do all of the A bolts, I think, in maybe some sort of a pattern, and then torque those down. Usually you would start from like the center and work your way out. So we're just gonna go for it. So weird applying sealant to bolts. So I just put a couple little 10 mils in there just to hold the gasket and the pump in place while I go ahead and start all these bolts. Yeah, I guess if you want to like goop me up a couple, we'll do so I did put the pulley on there as well when we install the water pump with the gasket, only because you may have a hard time actually getting that on, or it may not go on at all really. So, but you need to leave it loose so that you can access those bolts, remember? So I'm just about done doing my torquing sequence. I've gone over them 3 times. You'd be surprised that some of these bolts, like after you torque all of them down, you go back and recheck them, and as the gasket seats, they may lose their initial torque. So I need to make sure that these are all torqued down perfectly so that we don't have to take this apart. I'm just using some silicone-based dielectric grease for this O-ring. It's going to help aid in installation, sealing, and then also on our secondary installation when we actually go to put our water thermostat jacket housing, crossover tube, whatever you want to call it. Once we put that on, so it's good to have a little bit of lube or something to help it slip into that bore. And we also need to install this O-ring as well. And I'm going to use this grease as sort of a glue. There is no, like on that piece that butts up against the water pump, there's no groove or anything in it, so it's just a flat surface. You can see in the water pump housing, we've got a groove in there for the O-ring to sit in. So it's just going to help that stay seated in that groove and stay stuck on there. So, all right, we're doing our tensioner bolt now. And the thing about this bolt, it's reverse thread. And we need to torque this bolt to 35 foot-pounds. I'm gonna see if I can do it without getting like a pry bar or something, but I might need to stick some sort of a, yeah, I'm gonna have to stick a pry bar in between there or something. Let's try using this. Oops. Okay. Now I want to stick this idler pulley on, and then we're pretty much ready to put our belt on. And then once we get the belt on, we'll torque down those water pump bolts for the pulley. This one goes right here, and it is just regular thread. Both of those get torqued to 35 foot-pounds. This one with the longer bolt, reverse thread, so you're going to tighten it this way, versus this one, shorter bolt, it's just the idler pulley. You're going to be torquing it this way. I mean, with snap-on tools anyways. Depends on whether you're forward and reverse, which way it goes, but both 35 foot-pounds. And yeah, you can check your pulleys too. This one has a lot of play, so we'll be changing that out in the near future here. This one, not so much play. You just wiggle it side to side, and you shouldn't really have any play. A little bit of play is kind of acceptable, but you can also hear it too when you, like, you know, spin the pulley. Listen to it. Shouldn't have any groaning noises or anything like that. You can hear that bearing's kind of wore out. Should be quiet. So, to tensioner. Okay, just make sure everything's sitting on, make sure all the grooves in the belt are matched up with all the grooves in the pulleys. Everything's sitting where it's supposed to be sitting. Belt looks good. You can see the routing there. No interference with anything. And now we're ready to install our thermostat housing. Oops. Okay, just sitting like that. We're gonna put some sealant on the two 10mm bolts that go through that housing. Remember, there's also a stud with a nut. So we've got that as well. I set the nut up here somewhere. So get your nut started. Perfect. Thank you. And we got our bolt here. A little bit of sealant on there. Boom. Try to get the hole lined up. You'll be blind, so. All right, these three 10mm bolts, they get torqued to 15 foot-pounds. Or sorry, I guess it's 2 bolts, 1 nut. Okay, these bolts get torqued down to 15 foot-pounds. So that pass that I just did was a little overkill, but I'd rather not have a pulley fly off. All right, we're gonna put this back on, try to put it back in the exact same location. Something like that. And then stick this one on. Okay, and we'll put a clamp on there. Sometimes these clamps like to spring off of the pliers, so just watch your fingers because they'll get you. And it does not feel nice. All right, that's on there. It's not coming off. The other one's on there, not coming off. All our hardware is torqued down. Everything seems to be installed correctly to this point. We just have, we're getting the bolts cleaned up here. Ryan's cleaning them up. and we're gonna put some sealant on them. It looks like the 4 of the bolts that go through the engine mount bracket that bolts over all this piping, 4 of the bolts have sealant on the end of them, so we have to reapply that sealant. We don't. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a rundown on this one more time. Motor mount that's here underneath this front one, and there's another back one over in this corner. They all need to come apart. You don't have to completely remove them, but take the bolts out from underneath of these ones. 3 17mm nuts, 3 14mm nuts, and there's 2 bolts in this back one. And you gotta loosen them off so you can get the whole engine up. To get the bolt to go in, you can get all the bolts in except for one. And it's the second last one down here in this hole here. So we have, well, this vehicle just has a hole cut out in the wheel well. So we're gonna cheat and just pass it right through that hole, and it's gonna go right into the mount where it's supposed to go. So. Oh, that's amazing. Oh, 1 sec. I just gotta, okay, hold it right there. I just gotta lower it down a little bit. Back up a little. Okay, I might have to go down just a smidge. Probably about there. Which way does she gotta go?
Down a bit more.
Down? Okay. I'll try not to completely drop it. A little bit more. It's pretty close.
Yeah.
Or is it just the brake line that's getting in the way?
Might be brake. Could be just oh.
Yeah, it's a bit of the angle too. Boom. Just like that. Don't try this at home, folks. Hand tools for everything. We don't want to over torque.
What's this torque?
All the bolts for the engine mount, this one here, all 6 bolts get torqued to 40 foot-pounds. And we put sealant on all of them just to be sure, because there was sealant on some of them. So we cleaned all the bolts, put sealant on all of them. Like I say, we don't want leaks. Nobody likes leaks. You don't want to take this back apart. Do this job once, do it right. This has got those fucking marks on, but we gotta put this other thing on first. This gotta go on first. Kind of like that. And then this thing goes on like that. Damn straight. All right, we get these bolts snug down here. This piece goes on first, then this mount, then this piece. I just left the dog bone and this mount together, slid it in there. 2 medium-sized bolts, the longest bolt, the shortest bolt. And I just torqued these down to 40. All the big ones, I did 40. And these ones just snug them down by, I don't even know what the torque spec is. I couldn't find them.
Probably like 15, 20.
Yeah, I'd say like 15 or 20. And now we're gonna send it up in the air because we need to install our motor mount nuts. And the front one is 64, the side one is 50, and the back 2 bolts, I can't remember off the top of my head, I have to check. All right, 14 mil nuts, they go here. I have to use a socket to put that one in. You just put the whole box of salt in.
Remembered about that.
Okay, we'll put this in. And before we put any of the shields on, we're going to vacuum fill the cooling system. Yeah, we put those plastic covers back on. We're going to vacuum fill the cooling system, which we can check for leaks by doing that. You may not have a vacuum filler, so you can just go ahead and fill your cooling system up and run it. And hopefully it doesn't leak. So let's do that. We got some coolant, fresh, CarQuest, Lexus, Toyota, Scion, all the same manufacturer. So we got, this one's 50-50 premix coolant, so we don't have to add water. Some of the stuff you get, you might have to dilute it, and you would want to use, I think it's deionized water or distilled water, one or the other. I can't remember. No, it's supposed to use garden hose water or tap water because it's got minerals in it, and I don't know, it can cause deposits and all this other crap. But just get the premix stuff. I'm gonna get the vacuum filler. We'll hook that up. We want to try to pull 25 inches of mercury. That's a vacuum. We're sucking out all the air right now out of the system, so there's literally nothing in the system. It's just a vacuum. All right. And then we just let that sit for a second, and that'll tell us if we have any leaks, because it's trying to pull any air. If there was any leaks, it would suck air in, and then our vacuum would go back down. So it's looking pretty good. And then once we're ready, I'm gonna say we're good. We stick our fill hose into the bucket, and we turn this lever right here, and it starts sucking and cooling in. Now it's exchanging that vacuum or lack of air in the system for coolant. You can see the coolant hoses too. The coolant hose is completely flat. There's nothing in the system. This one as well. All right, so we are now at 0. You can see no more coolant coming in. We're ready to disconnect, remove our vacuum filling system. And we've still got some coolant left in the bucket, so we will top off our cooling system. We're gonna run it. Just make sure, get the vehicle up to operating temperature. Make sure the thermostat opens in time. Make sure we don't have any leaks. Make sure the cooling system is adequately filled. And make sure that our overflow reservoir also has coolant in it as well to the appropriate level. And then that's pretty much it. We're gonna stick the covers back on underneath. We had a bunch of hardware snap off, so deal with that. And that's about it. So yeah, that's pretty much empty. I just wanted to make sure our overflow reservoir here that's attached to our fan shroud was completely empty before I go to fill it up. I'd like to have new coolant in the system, get rid of as much as of the old coolant as I can. So I'm happy with that. I'll grab a funnel, and I guess we can start it now. If you want to fire it up, Ryan. Boom, just like that. Can you see how far we are? Or is it hard to see?
Hard to see.
Right there. Okay, perfect. Yep. Nice. And the reason we want to fill this up, when the cooling system heats up and expands and it cools down and contracts, the fluid exchanges from, this is just like an overflow tank. So when it gets too hot, this cap opens up and the coolant flows through that tube into this. It dumps it in here. And vice versa, when you shut it off and let it cool down after a long trip, it'll pull coolant back into the system. So it's constantly going back and forth when it gets hot and when it cools down. So it needs somewhere to overflow, and that's where. So if there is any small air pockets in the system, or even if it develops a new leak somewhere, it's nice to have a reserve of coolant to be able to have some to go back into the system. And obviously your mechanic should be monitoring that during oil changes and stuff like that. So yep, that's I guess pretty much it for the video. We're gonna put the shields back on, but I'm sure you know how to stick those back on. And that's it. If you have any questions, throw them down in the comment section below. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have. Give the video a thumbs up if you like it, and subscribe for more content. We'll see you in the next one. We did put a little bit of penetrating fluid on those threads too. It's just going to help from the bolts seizing up in the future. All right.